Actor Robert Wagner celebrated his 88th birthday on Saturday under new suspicions as a person of interest in the 1981 death of his wife, actress Natalie Wood. The case was reopened in 2011, and the cause of her death was changed from accidental drowning to drowning with undetermined factors.
Los Angeles County authorities now say new witnesses' stories might help them recreate what really happened during that fateful weekend on a yacht. Joining us with a closer look at the case, criminal defense attorney and former Deputy DA Ambrosio Rodriguez. Good morning,
Good morning.
sir. Welcome back.
Good morning.
So these new witnesses say they saw Wagner with Wood on the deck just before she disappeared.
Right.
How does that come into play, and how will the folks question their credibility?
Sure. Their credibility is questioned because it's been, 37, 38 years. It's very difficult to start all over again. The problem with this case, I think, is that the attitude that law enforcement had towards domestic violence, right, and domestic disturbances kind of set their attitude as to how they were going to deal with their investigation. If witnesses now, and they're credible, can describe a situation where he's the aggressor and somehow his physical actions caused her to fall, then there might be something there.
What about the assertions that Wagner didn't radio for help for 90 minutes after she had disappeared because he had said she was headed back to shore in a dinghy like she had done the previous night?
Yeah, that's always kind of been suspicious, right? How a husband or anyone in a kind of a relationship says that, well, she's just going to go in a dinghy at night in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and not be concerned. That kind of that 90-minute pause kind of reminds me of Chappaquiddick, if you remember, with when Senator Ted Kennedy was in a car accident with a female companion and falls into a ditch, and then he doesn't call the police until the next day. She dies. So that's always been suspicious. The way a person who's in a relationship, like a husband, a parent, acts after the disappearance of a loved one is always into play or part of the case in the investigation and something like this.
I've never understood why so many years later they changed the coroner's report. And one thing that folks have focused on is that the bruises on her arms and legs predated Natalie Wood either being pushed or voluntarily leaving the boat. In other words, she had these bruises and they happened before she fell in the water.
Right. And so the coroner that has changed the report obviously is a different coroner than the person who did it back in 1981. We shouldn't take that as black letter in the sense that I'm sure in some scenario where there is a trial, there are charges, Robert Wagner has obviously the resources to hire his own experts to go over that report. And we really don't know where those bruises come from. The fact that she has bruises, we don't know if he allegedly caused them, or she was in a fight, or she was the aggressor. There's so many questions. The bruises themselves are not enough.
Given the facts that we know, and then some stories from people that were in a nearby boat, they heard arguing, there was alcohol involved. What, if any, charges could be filed when you take those facts into account?
This is obviously all speculation, but it would be very hard to get to murder one from what we know so far, all right? And murder in the first degree requires a specific intent, willful, deliberate, and premeditated. This seems something more of a heat of passion, where a couple is arguing, is going back and forth, where you might end up with a voluntary manslaughter, or at worst, a murder in the second degree. Again, this isn't your typical kind of cold case where we don't know who it was, and then 30, 40 years later, there's new evidence that leads to a suspect, right? This was always the same person who was the suspect, right? The husband. Is just now some things have changed.
It's been suggested that Robert Wagner's attorney has said to his client, Robert Wagner, don't meet with the authorities, don't tell them another story, don't do another interview with them. And sort of as a layperson, you think, well, why not? Why wouldn't you just sit down and say, here's what happened, I'll tell you the story again. Play his attorney. Why shouldn't I do that?
That is very sound advice. I would give my client the same advice because it has been 37, 38 years. His memory, Robert Wagner's memory of that has changed. It has deteriorated, has mutated. It has become a narrative for him to kind of get through life, right? So there's going to be a different statement, and the difference in statement is going to be perceived or argued as a lie or him changing stories, and opens him up to being arrested. So no, that's the exact right thing.
Wagner, now 88 years old. Could his age impact the probability of a trial?
Oh,
something of that
absolutely.
nature.
I mean, even if there were charges tomorrow, this wouldn't get to trial for another 2 years. A murder case usually takes about 2 years to go to trial, so he would be 90 years old. A jury wouldn't see him as anything other than a frail old man who's 90 and lost his wife tragically 40 years ago.
All right. Once again, Ambrosio Rodriguez, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor based here in L.A. Good to see you.
Thank
Hey,
you
thank
for
you so
being
much.
here.
Thank you.